So, the Bucks beat the Hawks in Game 6, meaning we have a Hawks versus Bucks finals. And I think this can be a very good series. Obviously, the biggest thing is just Giannis's health, because if he's healthy, then yeah, I think this is going to be a very, very good series. Lots of storylines, two very good teams that are good on both ends of the basketball. But if Giannis isn't healthy, then I think the Suns definitely have a big advantage. But I don't think it's impossible for the Bucks to at least win a few games without Giannis until he gets back. But if he doesn't play at all, or if he comes back in Game 5 and they're down 3-1, then it could be pretty tough. But yeah, so that's just going to be something to monitor and to think about throughout this preview. But yeah, if we think about the Suns' offense first, because why not? Obviously their big thing is the pick and roll, and I think that's going to be a good weapon against the Bucks, especially down the stretch in close games. And I think it can be effective. Ayton setting the ball screen, Chris Paul handling the rock out top, or Devin Booker, whoever it is. And the big question for me is how the Bucks will defend that. I would assume that Brook Lopez will be out there. Because as much as everyone likes to say, oh, Giannis at center, you can switch more. Well, Brook is going to be out there sometimes. He's not going to play 0 minutes a game. And when that happens, obviously I think they'll stay in the drop. I doubt they'll switch that or be too aggressive. But if they could, have Brook Lopez being a bit more aggressive and just not letting Chris Paul walk into those mid-range shots, I think that could really, really help the Bucks out. And they did it a bit against the Hawks, so I really hope they carry that over, because I think that can be very, very helpful and help them a lot. But obviously, Chris Paul and Devin Booker are still going to hit mid-range shots. And also, my other fear of that is if Ayton gets, Brook Lopez steps up a bit too high, the paint gets open, and they're just throwing lobs to Ayton all day. And in that case, well, you need some better help rotations, and I think the Bucks have guys between PJ Tucker, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Giannis if he's out there, who can make those rotations and be good at them. So I think the mid-range will be a big battleground, and the pick and roll too. Also, I mentioned help defense. We'll have to see how aggressive the Bucks are with the help, whether they're willing to double Chris Paul or Devin Booker if they get going, or if Ayton gets a smaller player in the post through a switch, if they're willing to double and trust their rotations to get out to shooters like Crowder and Bridges, or whether they'll try and just stick to those guys out on the 3-point arc and just try and defend straight up, which I think that will be their preference. I don't think the Bucks will want to give up too many open threes, especially how confident Crowder and Mikal Bridges are taking those. If we think of other Suns things, I think Cameron Payne's development has been very, very good for the Suns, and I think having him out there to steady the offense when one of Paul or Booker sits is going to be helpful. I think the Bucks starting lineup is also a question, because the obvious ones are Tucker, Middleton, Drew, and Brook are going to be 4. And then the last starter, if Giannis is healthy, it's going to be him. And that's a pretty easy discussion. But if Giannis is not healthy, do they stick with their big lineup with Portis in there? Or do they go a bit smaller and put in Pat Connaughton? The advantage of the big lineup is I'm thinking about the matchups, and it does create some problems for the Suns. But it also creates some problems for the Bucks defensively, because you don't really get the matchups you would super want. But if you have Connaughton out there, I think you match up a bit better defensively, because Connaughton can be on one of Paul or Booker or Payne when he comes off the bench. And then, you don't have to have a mismatch where it's a bigger guy on someone smaller for the Suns. But offensively, you don't really have that size advantage anymore, and the Suns can match up better. So my gut says that Budenholzer will stick with the big lineup. It's won them 2 games in a row now, and I think that can give the Suns problems. But defensively, if we think about the matchups, I think it makes sense to have Brook Lopez on Ayton. That's pretty obvious. And then Portis on, let's just say, Crowder, because he's not guarding anyone else. And then you have Chris Paul, Booker, and Bridges who need defending from Drew Holiday, Middleton, and PJ Tucker. I think Drew Holiday on Chris Paul is an easy one there. Makes sense size-wise. In an ideal world, you'd like to stick Drew Holiday on Devin Booker, but then you get Chris Middleton on Chris Paul, which maybe now that I think about it isn't the worst thing, or PJ Tucker on Chris Paul. So maybe they will stick Drew Holiday on Devin Booker and just trust Chris Middleton on Chris Paul. I think the size advantage really helps out. And then he can also, like, if Chris Middleton gets switched onto Ayton, obviously Ayton could take advantage, but it's not as bad as if a smaller guy gets switched onto him. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if the Bucks put Drew Holiday, if they'll put him on Chris Paul or Devin Booker, because he's definitely their best perimeter defender and can probably shut down, well, not shut down, but really slow and give problems to whoever he's guarding. Also, how many minutes do the Bucks stars play? Obviously, you'd assume if Giannis comes back, they'd be a bit more conservative, but will Budenholzer be willing to play Drew Holiday 45 minutes? Or will he just go with, he's been a bit better, but will he go with 40? And I bet we better not see any Jeff Teague. Like, no offense to him, he was good in Game 6 versus the Hawks, but this is the NBA Finals, come on. Yeah. So, what was that? Yeah, Suns offense. Yeah, I think the Bucks match up actually pretty well. My only worry is just Brook Lopez dropping too deep and the Suns getting a lot of mid-range shots. And I don't think this is going to be a massive offense series. I think it'll be a bit slower pace, and I think the defenses will be pretty successful. That's just my gut, but we'll see. I think that's about it for the Suns offense. If we talk about the Bucks offense now, I mentioned it, Giannis injury, how much he plays, what games he plays in. It's just going to change so much, and it's going to be a different game by game, depending on Giannis's status. But I think the Bucks will have to hit a lot of tough shots offensively. That's sort of my initial thinking, just because I think they'll struggle to get a lot separation, and that's sort of what their offense comes down to a little bit too much, if you ask me. And they don't really like posting up. They just don't really have much else. Obviously, there'll be a little bit of off-ball Middleton stuff, hopefully. Trying to get in transition as much as possible, that sort of thing. But I also think it's going to be a lot of Middleton going one-on-one versus Bridges or Crowder or Devin Booker if they can get him switched onto it. And obviously that's not terrible, but you'd like something more. If Giannis is playing, I think the Suns will put Ayton on him and then just put Crowder on Brook Lopez. A lot of teams do it. And will the Bucks be willing to post up Lopez? I mean, 2 weeks ago I'd have said definitely not. That's not what they do. But he was massive in Game 5. So if they're sticking Crowder on him, I honestly wouldn't mind them throwing it into Brook Lopez, and letting him work in the post. But I don't think they'll be doing it too much. But I think it's something the Bucks should definitely consider, throwing it to Brook Lopez. If we think of who's going to defend who for the Suns, this is where the Portis having Portis in there and the Bucks' big lineup creates a bit of problems. So I think you probably stick Bridges on Middleton. That makes sense to me. Ayton on Lopez if Giannis isn't out there. I'm assuming Giannis isn't out there right now, so Ayton on Lopez. And then on Portis, who do you stick? Do you stick Crowder and then try and put Devin Booker on PJ Tucker and Chris Paul and Drew Holiday? That sort of makes sense to me, but then do you want someone like Crowder or Bridges on Drew Holiday? So then this is where it creates problems. So let's say they have Crowder on Middleton and Bridges on Holiday. That makes the most sense in terms of stopping the stars. And then, then you have to stick one of Chris Paul or Devin Booker on Bobby Portis. And, Portis isn't a massive post-up guy, but, you'd think that's a pretty favorable matchup for the Bucks. So we'll see if they just go for size and, maybe live with having a little worse defender on Drew Holiday like Chris Paul. I know Chris Paul's not a bad defender or anything, but, he's just not as big as someone like Crowder or Bridges. Or whether they just try and shut down Drew and Middleton and live with Bobby Portis posting up on Devin Booker a couple times. I think they'll try and put... I don't know. I think they might start with Paul on Holiday, but then I think when it comes down to it, I think they'll want to have their two best defenders on the Bucks' two best offensive players, because that just makes sense to me. And then if Bobby Portis is going to win the Bucks game, then that's going to happen. Though I doubt it will too much. If I think of anything else, the bench units, I think the Suns bench definitely has the advantage between Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson, Saric. If he comes in a little bit, I think you can have like a Saric-Portis matchup. That could be a thing in this series. I also think they'll throw in guys like Abdul Nader or Torrey Craig for a possession or two to guard Middleton, and I think that could be a good strategy for the Suns. And in the Bucks bench, I'm not a big fan of it. After their starting lineup with Portis in there, and then you have Connaughton off the bench, and then after that, it gets pretty dicey. It gets to Jeff Teague, Giannis's brother. It just gets a lot worse. Brent Forbes, also, I forgot to mention him. He could be important for the Bucks if they need a little bit of shooting. Though I think the Suns are pretty well equipped to attack someone. Like, I think they would just try and get him switched on to Booker, and you don't really want to give the Suns more offensive gasoline to put on their fire, if we're using a little figurative speech there. Yeah, so I think the Suns bench definitely has the advantage. I also think if Giannis isn't playing, the Suns should definitely win game one because they have home court, they're more rested, and it just seems like an important game to win. But if the Bucks can steal a game on the road, especially if it's without Giannis, then in game one, I think that could be massive for them. If we get to a prediction, obviously Giannis being healthy is the biggest thing in this series. If I knew Giannis was healthy, I would take the Bucks in 7. But there's just no guarantee. So I'm going to go with a bit safer pick. I'm going to say the Suns in 6. Assuming that Giannis misses a few games or isn't 100%. But if Giannis was healthy, I'd probably take the Bucks in 7. But anyways, thanks for watching this video, guys. Leave a like, subscribe to this channel for more NBA content, and I'll see you guys next time.